we're now going to talk about zero waste food and composting. And there's going to be a little connection there as well. We're going to start this session with an amazing restaurant and their story. Roots Restaurant is one of the most unique businesses in the area. It's a beautiful and spacious indoor restaurant. They have delicious food and cocktails, and eating outside is like dining in your neighborhood park at Roots Restaurant. I think they had over 12 geodesic domes supporting them through the winter and protecting you dining there. Please welcome Resilient Restaurants member Vipul Seth, owner of Roots Restaurant in Broomfield. He should be able to join us shortly. Vipul, is that working out for you? Oh, there you go. We can hear you.
Okay, can you see me now? Almost.
The top of your head.
Is it good?
That's good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. My wife and I opened the restaurant last year in July because of COVID. We had no business. We are a catering company and a venue, so we had no business left. That's why we started a restaurant. But we are very much into environmental sustainability, and that has always been one of our, I guess, operational focus as a company. We always have, not always, like at least for 12 years now, composted. We don't compost ourselves, but we have, industrial compost pickup. We recycle. We get 100% wind energy. We reduce, reuse. We, for staff, for example, we don't have any um, throwaware, as I call them. We use reusable utensils for our staff. Um, and our biggest issue has been, just the education component of it, and how to make sure that consumers and customers, they get on the bandwagon, so of sustainability. That has been the biggest challenge for us. And it is easy in a event situation to manage that, because what we do is we take away the decision making from our customers into our hand. We don't leave any trash bins at an event center, for example, for them to put something in. So we collect that, all the trash, and then make sure it goes to compost or recycle or waste, whatever. Um, and we have 12 raised beds, like 10 raised beds in our backyard, that we are able to grow some stuff there. And we have added 7 geodesic domes, the ones that we use for dining in. Now we are using them for growing food. So we are going to use them for growing food and to increase our, I guess, growing cycle, as well as to add more produce to our repertoire. So I guess the crux of it. We also have LED lighting here. We have occupancy sensors. And if it gets dark while I'm talking to you, do not be surprised, because I have an occupancy sensor in this room, and that's hidden behind the door, I guess. Uh, yeah, that's one more thing is that we have been wanting to do reusable takeaway program, but it has been challenging for us just because of the customer participation, the cost of it, and just the logistics of implementing the program. So that's something we are very interested in, and we would love to like partner on that thing. Any questions, or do you want any clarifications about anything?
Yeah, not right now, Vipul. Maybe we'll get back to you at the end of the session in the Q&A spot.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank
Uh,
you.
yeah, your story. Now this was kind of teeing up the zero waste food. Vipul was able to share kind of some overall sustainability actions. And now we're going to dive deeply into zero waste food and composting even more. Our next speaker is an outreach partner, a GBC member as owner of Scraps, a Denver Metro composting service. Let's make some soil with Christy Turner.
Thank you so much. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So yeah, I own a company called Scraps. We started just over almost 4.5 years ago now, really just responding to the lack of robust options to compost in Denver. We wanted to focus specifically on apartments and condos, and we do. That is our major market, but our first client was actually a restaurant, and restaurants continue to be a really strong portion of our membership. So we realized that there was a need there that also wasn't being filled by the current options. Currently, we have about anywhere between 40 to 50 restaurants, and I'm including food producers and school cafeterias as well. Certainly lower in numbers, total quantity of members of our nearly 1,000 members, but produce quite a bit of volume for us on a weekly basis. We love working with restaurants for so many reasons. We just signed up a brand new food hall, for instance, Golden Mill, and we've really been focusing on the messaging there as, you know, food halls, restaurants, third places where people spend their time can really be amplifiers of the zero waste messaging and composting messaging that we're trying to make the norm in people's everyday lives. And yeah, in order to help make it the norm for our restaurant customers, you know, one of the things that we saw was clearly lacking in the existing and very limited option to compost that restaurants had before we came on the scene, which was essentially only Alpine Waste and Recycling, which has now been acquired by GFL, was a lack of training, a lack of education, and a lack of ongoing communication on that education front. We believe most firmly in the why of composting, and then the how and the what kind of come naturally. Obviously, I'm speaking to the choir here, but when you really understand and believe in the impacts of waste diversion and can really see, you know, what an enormous impact you can make as a restaurant, especially, then operationalizing it, making a habit of little changes in how you both your back of house and front of house operate comes a lot easier. So we really focus on the training and education piece. It ensures team buy-in. It helps to make sure that diversion rates are as high as we can get them. And then of course, and Monique will speak more to the importance of this next, to really ensure that contamination is as low as possible. We work really hard with our restaurants to support them in, and I heard the previous speaker just as I logged in transitioning all of their materials to compostable materials, all of their disposable materials. It's a lot easier to control in a front of house situation. Back of house, there's still a lot of things like rubber gloves and bits of plastic and Cambros. And in fast-paced kitchens, it takes, again, really that emphasis on the why of composting and meeting people where they are, making sure that they find a place where composting is important to them and easy to integrate into their kind of individual and team operations to really minimize that contamination. We have signage. This is some of our sort of generic signage, compost only, no plastic bags. We do custom signage for some of our members. Like I mentioned, we have a nice new partnership with Golden Mills. So we did signs like this, especially for their opening day or opening week, I should say. So folks all around the food hall could know what to look for. So we support our restaurants as much as we can to make sure that that education is thorough and consistent, again, back of house and front of house. There are, of course, so many challenges with restaurants and disposables. Again, I only caught the last half of that original or that last presentation, but you know, cost is certainly something that folks bring up to us time and time again. We have a great relationship with some local distributors. World Centric was mentioned. They're more a manufacturer, but their distributor EPD is a great partner of ours. So we've been able to put together pricing sheets for folks to help show them that, hey, when you make a full switch from, you know, disposable plastic straws to compostable straws and throw in compostable ramekins instead of disposable plastic ramekins, you can actually save money. And sometimes if you're not saving money, the difference is less than a quarter of a penny per unit, sometimes even less than that in the case of straws. So we really work with folks as much as we can to overcome those financial challenges and tweak their operations to kind of balance out whatever financial challenges might be posed by switching to 100% compostable, especially in large public facing front of house situations. It's really difficult to ensure that kind of high diversion, low contamination if you have a mix of plastics and compostables. I know I'm about to run out of time here, so just a couple kind of shout outs to our restaurants who are really, really crushing it. Somebody people, of course, I've already heard them mentioned once or twice since I've logged in, and you'll hear from as well in the summit. Absolutely crushing it on all fronts. Started Somebody People with a vision and a commitment to zero waste, and it goes absolutely throughout their operations. It's amazing. Chook, brought to us by the founders of Snooze, is of course absolutely crushing it. These are both places where people are staff takes individual responsibility to make composting and waste diversion a part of their jobs, and in some cases there's an actual sort of sustainability czar on staff as well. And then Main Shack, one of our newer restaurants, we've seen an incredible commitment from them to get to 100% diversion. And that is even with challenges posed by the health department, which is still lagging. I'm sure, as you all have discussed or will discuss in this summit, is still lagging on changing regulations around, say, sauce packets and disposables that are still required versus having shared stations where people can self-serve. So yeah, thanks so much. It's a joy to be a part of this.
Thank you, Christy. Really appreciate your time and coordinating. Next up, well, actually, I just wanted to say, you know, Colorado has a decentralized infrastructure for our food supply and our recovery systems. And so, you know, when we look at resilient restaurants creating programs and support, and ones that are going to work for the Eastern Plains, for the Front Range, and for the Western Slope, they all have their own unique challenges and opportunities that we face to solve these problems, not only for food distribution, food insecurity, and food waste recovery as well. So our next speaker is Monique DeGiorgio, who co-owns Table to Farm Compost in Durango. She serves on the local First Foundation and Recycle Colorado. Monique, thank you for speaking today and sharing with us about what food waste and composting looks like in rural Colorado.
Yeah, thanks so much, Robert. Yeah, it's fun to follow up Christy's operation with what we do down here, which is very similar, except that we are in a rural environment. So we're down here in Durango, Colorado. If you don't know where that is, that's southwest corner of Colorado. I think it's about 200 miles to the nearest interstate. And we were started also about 4 years ago, similar to Scraps, just one bucket at a time, not necessarily focused on apartments, although we do have definitely a lot of customers who have apartments, but really any resident here in Durango or La Plata County, Colorado. And interestingly enough, being in a rural environment, a lot of our customers are composting with us because of the potential conflict that they might have with trash and compost and bears. So being in a more rural environment, you know, we definitely have a lot of open space, wildlife. So we love that down here. And that means compost piles can attract animals. So a lot of our customers have that in mind. We do work with commercial customers and quite a few restaurants. We have a little bit of a different perspective in terms of like back of house, front of house. than was mentioned earlier. One of the things that we saw with one of our customers, Cream Bean Berry, and if you've been down to Durango, you have to get her ice cream. It's pretty awesome. Is, and I think Christy was speaking to this earlier, that, you know, when folks, we're kind of a tourist community, come into, let's say, Cream Bean and Berry, it's really hard for them to make the right choices when throwing items into either the compost bin or the trash bin. So we actually had to, unfortunately, stop collecting front of house compost because the contamination was just far too great. And that was kind of a bummer because this particular business owner really wanted to compost. So when she started giving us more of like her fruit and the other kind of back of house products, that worked out better for us. And then we're also a compost manufacturer. So one of the things that we've worked with some of our restaurants with is what is compostable. Because we're still pretty small scale, we really stopped accepting compostable products, which, you know, I think at some point we would like to change that. But what we were noticing is that they just don't break down in the piles, and was just going to give a little story to kind of share that. And Christy mentioned, you know, the cost of compostable products. So this Cream Bean Berry customer actually was paying a really pretty penny for a spoon that was actually compostable only at 200 degrees, which any thermophilic compost pile actually should never get to 200 degrees because it becomes combustible at that point. So there's a lot of like education and working with folks on kind of finding the right product and really knowing that it's going to break down. She actually found a spoon that I think was then compostable at like 160. And that still didn't really work very well in our piles. I think that's a better product. It actually cost her less money, but it still wasn't breaking down. But I do think there's more consciousness in the compostable plastics community, especially EcoCycle is one that does a really good job where they're trying to make products that will break down in a commercial facility. We're still small enough that we are not doing that. So we're really trying to work with restaurants again in that back of house. And the other thing that I was going to bring up, being in a rural agricultural community, is that one of the things that we see, which is great, there's a bit of a food hierarchy down here. So a lot of the commercial customers we work with, whether it's grocery stores or restaurants, are actually sending their food products or food waste to farms and ranches, which is great. And also a lot of our restaurants are recycling that food because they're creating stocks, you know, with them. So we actually found that there's still a lot of room for growth for us to work with more restaurants, but we're seeing, you know, that compostable amount that we would get as a compost business is a little bit less because we're seeing people in our community actually take that food waste and put it back in the system in a different way, which we think is great. So it's just kind of one of those interesting conundrums, maybe because we're surrounded by more farms and ranches. That's something that maybe wouldn't be an issue in a metro area. So just wanted to kind of bring some perspective to, I guess, you know, the process of composting and that the science behind what works and what doesn't work. I think as a community, there's a lot that we could do together to make sure that if restaurants are going to spend that money to get the product, that it's the right product and the product that can break down in the nearest composting facility close to them. So thanks for having our rural perspective here today and for putting this on, Robert. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you, Monique. It'll be interesting to see what questions we might be able to get in. But before we do, we have one more speaker, and we're going to have to go all the way to Brooklyn, New York now to learn about a sustainable hospitality firm that is very interested in working with our members here in Colorado. Our next speaker is Christina Grace, a New York City Zero Waste champion and CEO of Foodprint Group. Christina, thank you for joining us, and please share with us.
All right, all right, I'm going to share my screen. Hi, everyone. First, I want to say, Monique, my in-laws had a place for the longest time in Pagosa Springs, so I've spent a lot of time in Durango and love it. Here, let me dive in. So thank you so much, Robert, for including Foodprint and Resilient Restaurants of Colorado's Earth Day Summit. we're here to talk waste tracking today because that is one of the things we do. Before I dive in though, I want to acknowledge the food and hospitality people who are on the line, the professionals who have kept the lights on during COVID while bearing so much of the economic burden and challenges of the pandemic. You are totally our superheroes, and we feel very lucky to get to work in food and hospitality as a zero waste service provider. I'm going to jump in here to my slides. So we work with food and hospitality companies to eliminate waste. We have a zero waste program, a train the trainer method, and a lot of tools for ongoing waste tracking and carbon reporting. We all know we waste a lot of stuff in food and hospitality, but food is the biggest thing. We can see here 40% of the food grown in the US is wasted from farm to plate, and most of that happens in customer facing places. Well, it's kind of tied with what we do at home. So that end of the chain, we have a lot of work to do, and of course we want it to be a circle and not a chain. So why so much waste? Well, in our places, we look at the design of the physical places. Sometimes our places are designed so that it's not so easy to recycle and reduce waste. We look at the stuff we buy. Sometimes we buy things that are not recyclable, compostable, or can't be reused and can only be trashed. And then we have an information challenge. Companies often have a really poor understanding of what's in the waste stream and the negative impacts of waste, because waste is perceived as tough to measure. Unlike electricity, we don't really have a meter for tracking daily waste. And so we have spent some time on that. Most of our clients, all they have is their hauling bill, and sometimes that bill doesn't include anything about weight or volume or by stream, and is just a monthly rate. So we spend a lot of time trying to help our clients figure this out. We have a tool called Footprint Tracks, which our clients use, and I see we're cutting it off a little bit with our faces over here, but you can use tracks on a tablet or your phone, and your teams can track your daily waste by unit. So we're not asking our clients to weigh all their waste every day. We're helping them do intermittent audits to determine the unit weight. So how much does a bag weigh? How much does a 35-gallon tote of compost weigh? And then we customize the system to work with our clients based on how they're moving their waste and their unit weights, so that we can calculate on a daily and then monthly basis the total weight of organic waste, of their mixed recycling or separating glass and plastic and trash and cardboard and all those pieces, to help them understand their waste diversion and calculate the carbon benefits of their recycling and waste reduction efforts. Clients of ours that are interested in True Zero Waste certification know that they need to track at 90% or better diversion from landfill for 12 months. So they rely on us to help them do that. And if they see their diversion dipping, they want to know why. So they kind of lean on us to help them create some tools to run around their businesses and make sure all the key program components are in place. Like the signage is still up. We're training our new employees on how to separate our food waste for composting and all those pieces. But we also, it's not, let me see, I'm having some trouble moving right now. I don't know why. But my screen is freezing here. Huh. There we go. So we provide, this is a sample of a PDF report, but we provide online reports with the diversion rate and all the information I just talked about. We look at month over month. We want to see progress. And then we want to take that carbon. If we have saved X metric tons of carbon, we want people to be able to understand that means the equivalent to this many cars off the road or this many trees planted. So it's really tangible for employees and for you to be able to share with your customers when you're doing this good work. We also use waste audits, and we do audits. You can see an audit at a loading dock in a very large space, like a hotel space, and then you can see a kitchen audit where we're literally taking containers off counters at each station, and we're determining waste. And it's really important to understand, and we're here talking about food in this session, because in a food and hospitality space, more than 50% of your waste is generally food. And you can see over the right, back of house versus front of house. So what Monique was saying is it really stinks when you can't get that front of house organic waste for your compost. But if you are preparing food on site, most of the food is back of house anyway. We're looking at this example that's 91%. coming from back of house in a fast casual environment that just so happens to have a lot of food prep. And of course, most of the food leaves is not eaten on site in fast casual. But even in fine dining and hotel spaces, we will see at least 50% of the waste being food. And we help our clients understand where in the kitchen waste is coming from. If you want to drive change, you really have to understand it. And so is it coming from the dish room? Is it in catering? Or is it hot prep? Are we pulling things off of a buffet? Although buffets, I think the way of the buffet has gone post-COVID, but historically we found a lot of waste there. Our clients also use other cool tools to track their food waste. Tools like Lean Path and Winnow help you track your waste by type, change your menu to improve and reduce waste, and to really understand you're basically weighing every bit of waste, and it's automatically going into the Lean Path system, and it's sometimes integrated with your menu and other information. Most inventory management tools that you already have some kind of waste tracking in them. This is an example onto the right here of MarketMan, which is an inventory management tool that does a lot within fast casual and coffee places. But they are really working hard to incorporate waste tracking into the system to make it easy to integrate with purchasing and help their clients do better. We work with lots of cool companies. I feel very, very lucky, and of all shapes and sizes. Some very large, global hotel chain, and then a small bakery here in New York City, and our tools transfer in all kinds of environments. But it's great. It's so great to be here, and I hope we have some questions.
Hi, thank you, Christina. One quick question for you is actually from Vipul. He was asking, do you work with any industrial recycle or composting companies that don't weigh what they pick up?
So most of our clients, unless your waste is in a compactor, most of our clients, their waste is being picked up in bags at the curb or front, FEL containers, front end load containers that get tipped. So no one's got a scale on the truck, right? Or if they do, they don't work very well. So most haulers cannot tell you, unless they're pulling compactors, exactly how much waste you're generating. So you need to do some of your own tracking internally. Truckloads obviously get weighed when they're brought to compost facilities or to the recycling facilities for initial separation, but it's hard to translate that back to your actual business.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. This question is for Christy. Do you think that surrounding areas will be able to send more organic waste to Denver? Is there an opportunity for more infrastructure to be developed?
I guess in part it depends on what they mean by surrounding areas. There's certainly, I don't know what the 2021 status of this is, but there are a number of permitted composting facilities belonging to some of the major waste haulers that are not activated because there are some other issues that we couldn't quite address in 5 minutes surrounding composting, such as the lack of robust end markets. So there are major haulers that refuse to invest in composting, even if they have permitted sites, and it's quite expensive to get a site and get it permitted for industrial scale composting. But they won't actually do the hauling because the end market piece is so tricky for a number of reasons. But certainly there's capacity.
Okay, thank you. And I guess this could be for Christy or Monique, but maybe Monique, since just to spread it around. Either the question is basically compost services are being developed, and just from a market growth standpoint, is it expected that the cost of providing compost services will go down because there'll be more efficiencies and greater economies of scale, or should business owners expect that composting will not necessarily get cheaper, but it's going to get better?
That is such a good question. Yeah, I'm happy to maybe take the first crack at that, and then maybe Christy or others have a response. So in a perfect world, when my business partner and I talk about how the system should work to disincentivize trash and food going to a landfill, we would be paying people for what has value. And so in a perfect world, we would say, oh, maybe at some point, we'd be creating such a high value product that, we could actually pay people for giving us that food waste. And unfortunately, it's not going that direction, I'm sorry to say. So one of our, just to give you a sense of here in Durango, one of our constraints right now is that we're going from an exempt facility to a full-scale facility. The sheer cost of permitting a facility is in the hundreds of thousands. So, by the time we pay that off and then sell a lot of compost, it's going to be years from now. Will I ever be able to bring my customers' costs down? I don't think so. I mean, I want the system to work that way, but right now I can say for a smaller composter trying to go to a mid-size, like this system is just not going to work that way for us, and we would go out of business.
I think that's a fair expectation. Everybody should view it still as an investment in creating these new markets and creating new systems that are going to have a lot more long-term beneficial, benefit to us than the money up front. So. Does anybody have any quick comments just about that piece?
Yeah, this is, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Each of you, go ahead.
This is Chris Grace. I would add that this is a real policy issue, because as long as landfill remains cheap and you're not really paying for the negative impacts of it, we don't, carbon credits, even in places that have them in this country, are super cheap. So there's not a huge incentive. I mean, it's cheap to buy them when you're not a great actor. And we're not pushing for some of the things that would create broader markets, because not all of our compost is going to be fabulous quality. And the community composting opportunities, you can make really great compost, but if we want to do it on the scale at which we're talking, there need to be other markets. And imagine every construction site in Colorado had to include compost in a build, because it's more absorbent than the typical soil, the typical, fill that they're bringing into these spaces. And we're dealing with climate issues, and maybe Denver doesn't get as much rain as some of other places like New York, but just imagine if we started to think about the importance of having good soil everywhere and different levels of it, whether it's in construction fill or whether it's to grow super nutritious food, and create different markets. Compost would become more valuable. But I think it can't just be left up to the market. There does have to be policy change.
Yeah, and Robert, if there's time, I would add from both a policy perspective and I guess a kind of a small business organization perspective. At least here in Colorado, as everyone has spoken to, it's expensive and difficult to get a compost facility, an industrial scale compost facility set up. There are virtually no avenues to get a meaningful amount of compostable material processed into finished compost in areas that are, say, closer to residential areas. There's all sorts of methodologies that make that more feasible, but from a regulatory perspective, it just isn't allowable at this time in our state. And then kind of on the small business front, and I'm sure Monique, as you guys have grown, you've dealt with this, even as a small scale hauler using, full-size pickup trucks and not using CDL trucks, we're treated like a trash company. Our overhead, just insurance alone, workers' compensation alone is pretty crushing, and we're treated as waste management is treated. And it's a battle that we continually fight as a company and as an industry to get a more sophisticated understanding of the different levels of compost collection.
Yeah.
That's
Interesting. Helpful information. I need to keep things moving, unfortunately. If you want to write up any other comments following up on that question, happy to include it in our write-up post-event. So I want to thank all of our Zero Food Waste and Composting speakers and Christina at Foodprint Group. Have a wonderful afternoon.